At the Royal Institution, science is for everyone. We believe that science transforms lives and underpins the modern world. From health to the latest technology, the environment, and the furthest reaches of our universe. That's why we create space for scientists and the public to explore science together. Building on our heritage of discovery and demonstration, we share science through our thought-provoking public events, world-famous Christmas lectures, YouTube videos, engaging digital content, and inspirational education programmes. Join us as a member or patron of the Royal Institution today, and help us nourish people's desire to engage with science and scientists. We are a home for science, and everyone is welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Oh yeah, why not? In fact, I will take this opportunity to tell you that was the Visual Polymath Festival's theme, Listen, by Leonardo Barilaro. If I said that right, Barilaro. Yes, Leonardo Barilaro. I'll tell you a bit more about the Polymath Festival in a moment. Very quickly, for those of you that haven't met me, my name is Dan. Welcome to the Royal Institution. If you've been before, then welcome back. And if you're a member or a patron, again, as always, thank you so much for your support. In fact, all of you, by buying a ticket tonight, are supporting the charitable aims of the RI to engage the public with science. If you haven't been before, then an extra special welcome. I hope it's not the last time we see you. And there's a chance that you might be here, not because you're used to the RI and the things we do, but that you're here as part of the Polymath Festival, which tonight's event is not only part of, it is actually the final event of the Polymath Festival. We're very pleased to be working with them, with the Da Vinci. Oh, sorry. Now it's clear I've forgotten what they're called. No. It's a collaboration with the Da Vinci Network, and it is their Polymath Festival that tonight is the final event of. And if you haven't been here before, then do check out our website for the other events that we have going on. We've got stuff coming up from the hunt, it's covering everything from the hunt for planets that could host extraterrestrial life to curing childhood asthma, and everything in between those two, whatever that spectrum is that has those two things on it, we've got everything going on. But the Polymath Festival has all sorts of things going on, but I can't tell you about those, so I'm going to introduce you to somebody who's going to introduce the next thing. There's a few things that are happening a bit different tonight, so I hope you enjoy it. But I will get out of the way, and I will introduce Waqas Ahmed to tell you a bit more about Polymath Festival. Thank you very much. Just leave it to the side when you're done.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome again to everybody here. Welcome to the Royal Institution, and welcome to the finale of the Polymath Festival. The Polymath Festival is a season of events that's happened over the last 6 weeks. And over 25 events have happened, mostly here in the UK and online, but also abroad in the US and the UAE. And there is a particular reason why it's called the Polymath Festival. And of course, you can probably guess why the theme of today's talk is Leonardo da Vinci. Before I tell you a bit more about that, I just want to add to what Dan mentioned about the track that you heard at the start by Leonardo Barilaro. And he is known as the space pianist, and he uses kind of sounds from solar wind and sounds used actually from Earth's orbit within his work, because he is both an artist as well as a scientist. And we felt it apt that he composed something original for the Polymath Festival, which after all is about this very kind of interdisciplinarity that Leonardo da Vinci is the archetype of. So my first question to you, I suppose, it's rather rhetorical, which is, why is it that we are here, assembled? Why did you come from wherever you arrived? It could be from far, it could be from close by, but you came in honor of and to learn more about a particular person from over 500 years ago, whose work may or may not be relevant, but certainly is fascinating. Why is it that we remain fascinated by this individual and his work? You see, I think my thesis, or should I say my understanding, is that there is something missing in today's civilization, in today's society, which causes us to yearn for something greater, yearn for the higher tier of human potential, and to strive towards being better as individuals, but also in doing so, perhaps we can make some novel contributions to society. And God knows we need them now more than ever. Our challenges are becoming ever more complex, sometimes difficult to understand, let alone tackle. And so therefore we need all the tools, the mental models, the epistemologies that we can possibly think of at our disposal to be able to embark on this very important task. And it's important, of course, because not only are we all members of the human family, but also we are multiple generations looking at future generations to see how we might create a better world. So my contention has always been that in order to do that, we need to have an interdisciplinary understanding, or shall we say an interdisciplinary approach, which of course is not commonplace in the world we currently live. We have a society, an education system, a workplace culture that fosters siloed specialization at the expense of human fulfillment, as well as at the expense of a greater understanding, a more holistic understanding of our world. And I've intuited this for a long time. I'm sure many of you have too. But I decided to really work within this area to help promote more interdisciplinary approaches. And in doing so, of course, I've looked at individuals over history, but also today, that have really tried, have taken this approach, a more holistic, comprehensive, interconnected approach to knowledge in general, within the sciences, across the sciences, beyond into the humanities and arts, and so on. And so, in my quest to try to further this approach, we started the Polymath Festival in 2021, and the idea is to build a community of those that either consider themselves polymaths or aspire to become more polymathic. And in doing so, to sort of create a culture and to try and mainstream this whole notion that I've just described. So now, 4 years on, with this Polymath Festival, we have managed now to really assemble some really great thinkers from different cultures, from different generations, all speaking generally about this concept of the polymath, someone who is exceptionally versatile and thus often excels in multiple, seemingly unrelated fields. And then there's the higher order polymath who actually actively tries to make connections between these different fields for novel insight. But actually, more recently, I've come across those polymaths who are in short supply and actually have been, who do something a bit more than that, and who really transcend this kind of this approach that we see at a superficial level, and it just becomes part of their being. And in doing so, they have inadvertently, often inadvertently, made profound contributions to the advancement of human civilization. And this is, on that note, I think it's important to introduce the speaker that you have all chosen to come and listen to today. And Professor Martin Kemp is, of course, I mean, he is one of, if not the most important authorities on Leonardo da Vinci. I won't speak much more about Leonardo. Many of you know of him or much about his work, and we're going to learn more. But Martin's work in himself is polymathic, immersing himself for 5 decades in the work and in the life and in the mind and the approach of Leonardo. And so we have this treasure trove of wisdom, which I am very honored to be in our presence today. And I would like to invite Martin to tell us more about what he's learned over this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakas. Set up perhaps expectations which I will struggle to meet. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's always wonderful to lecture in this room with the ghosts of Faraday and other people much more distinguished than I. It's a lovely space. It's got an amazing feel to it, and it's got this enormous historical depth. Yeah, Leonardo, the manic monomath. Why monomath? The answer is that Leonardo didn't see these as separate areas which he was gelling. He didn't see them as separate areas in which he was making particular headway. He saw it all as part of one great system, governed by mathematics ultimately. So he's far from doing lots of things. He sees himself as doing one kind of thing, which is the analysis of nature and the remaking of nature in experiments and in his art. He didn't see these as separate episodes. Let me just do a small diversion, which looks to be taking us away from Leonardo, but illustrates that there is no way, in a sense, that Leonardo doesn't become relevant, even where he doesn't seem to be active. Looking at Wacas's book, and one by Peter Burke, who a few years, a different time from Wacas, wrote about polymath, there was an area which I thought somehow didn't come across. Sorry, Wacas. And that is scientists in particular, but people in the arts generally who became significant musicians. I suspect it's in mathematics and the precise sciences that you find people working on math in relation to music with an insight. These slides embody that. On the left is Ingres, the great French neoclassical painter and very eccentric and marvelous drawer of portraits. That's a self-portrait. In the middle is his drawn portrait made in Rome of Paganini. He fell out badly with Paganini later. He was capable of playing with these people. He played with leading violinists of his day. Wacas does look at Einstein and the violin, which is obviously the one on the right. But it seems to me that there is a certain kind of science which plugs into a certain kind of music. The French call the second string the additional element of somebody, the violon dingue, the violin of Ingres. That's to say, looking at Einstein, we've got the violin dingue and the violin d'Albert as a particular motif, a sort of monomathic technique. This may seem some way away from Leonardo, but Leonardo was a musician, a master of the viola, which is a sort of viola which is an ancestor of a violin. So Leonardo is involved as a kind of proto-violinist in all this. And the moral of this is that there's almost no area you can go into and you don't find that Leonardo is doing something of significance. The Leonardo legacy is extraordinary and very difficult to come to terms with. I'm involved with Domenico Lorenzo at the moment in doing a new edition, facsimiles right through to translations, commentaries of the French manuscripts. There are 12 manuscripts in the Institut de France, or kept in the Bibliothèque Nationale, which were part of Napoleon's capture and war booty, which never went back to Italy. Rather oddly, the Italians, I don't think, have made strenuous efforts to repatriate this. But this is what Leonardo manuscripts look like. The Codice Atlantico, that huge assembly, which is in Milan, and a little less big assembly of the Arundel Codex in the British Museum. Then there are all these different notebooks, and they're different kinds of notebooks. Some of them are loose sheets which have been bound together, some loose sheets which have been put inside each other, some little pocket books which he buys already made up. They are from the cartolaio, from the shop that sells these things, sells papers, etc., etc. And if you look at these, almost none of them deal with one topic. The one which comes closest to it is the one on the left, which is manuscript D on the eye, dell'occhio. And that is more or less about that one theme, about the eye. But all the other ones are very diverse. One of the manuscripts, think it's manuscript B, there are about 6 on the first folio, the first folio and the verso of the first folio. There was something like 6 different topics are opened up. And what I mean by manic is not just these diverse, but there's a desperation about what he does. He looks at one thing, thinks about something else, he has to note that down. Now he noted that down, he thinks of something linked to it, he has to note that down. There is a kind of sprinting desperation to get all this down. And he's afraid in a way of losing a bit of it and it not reappearing. And the Codex Arundel in the British Museum. Damn, I've lost the relevant slide now. Sorry, I'll have to come and read this from one of the ones at the side. You can see this, but I'll read it out anyway. This will be a collection without order, drawn from many pages that I have copied here, hoping to put them in order in their places, according to the subjects with which they will deal. And I believe that before I am at the end of this, I will have to repeat myself many times. Here I shall pay attention only to find cases and inventions, casi and invenzione, and I shall note them successively as they present themselves. Then I shall give an order by putting together those of the same kind. Therefore, for now, you will not wonder, nor will you laugh at me, reader, if here such big jumps are made from one matter to another matter. This is almost a perfect description of the Leonardo manuscripts and how they've come together. Various people, including myself, have put them in various kind of orders or thematic groupings, but this is ultimately his technique. It's one which has this manic desperation to it. He doesn't want to forget anything. He doesn't want an aside. And he's a pathological lateral thinker. He can't look at anything without it reminding him of something else. And you think Leonardo, it's very frustrating. It's wonderfully exhilarating because he starts on one thing and ends up somewhere else, as we will see. And that's wonderfully exhilarating, but it's frustrating as well. Every so often you think, stay with that, Leonardo, it's really good. Get that down now and move on when you feel you can. But there is that element of desperation, of wanting to cover absolutely everything. This is embodied in this remarkable double-page sheet at Windsor, which Carlo Progetti, the great late Leonardo specialist, called the theme sheet. There are 16 different types of things on that sheet. I won't enumerate them all. Actually, there are enumerated under the slide. But just extraordinary. The last one is how to make a dye for blonde hair. This, I think, is not an aspiration of Leonardo, but is directed at the court ladies in Milan who had very elaborate hairstyles. This is amazing. You know, there's lots of serious stuff there, geometry, etc., naturalistic things, observations, a bit of machinery. But this is extreme, but the theme sheet is, in a sense, the motif which we follow when we trace Leonardo's ways of thinking. Not sure how well this is visible. This I designed for one of the big online courses, MOOCs. What's happened to them? They're still around. No, that is actually quite legible. Good. This I designed for one of these. I was at Princeton at the time, and the MOOCs were going to replace lecturers, and all sorts of things were going to be happening. They still seem to be proceeding, but they haven't swept other educational experiences aside. And education experiences, to my mind, is very much person to person, whether it's a big audience or a small audience, nonetheless that pertains. This maps everything that, all the topics which Leonardo did. starting with the center, with the microcosm, with the four elements and so on. This is you've got a detail of it here, and as you go upwards, so the things go from theory and science and artificial things to more concrete productions with a fan at the top with all the works of art. I'd love to do this as a three-dimensional scheme. It may be with artificial intelligence we can do exactly that. It's a three-dimensional scheme which would get somewhere close to how Leonardo works these things. Anyway, let's see. The theme I'm going to choose for the monomath, to chase it through with these associations, this continual association of one seen thing with another, and not least it is seen things. He sees things and sees the formal analogy, or senses a formal analogy, senses an evolutionary analogy of some sort, which gives him that amazing sense of fluid transition from one topic to another. The theme I'm going to look at is familiar enough from my writings and I think from discussions of Leonardo, the microcosm and the macrocosm, the human being as embodying the great structures of the cosmos as a whole, that unity. It's a commonplace in a way from classical antiquity through the Middle Ages. What Leonardo does is to give it enormous intellectual punch and to give it a lot of leverage. The microcosm, again, I'm going to have to come out and read this. Am I audible when I'm reading? Yeah. This then is the microcosm. We might say that the earth has a vegetative soul and that its flesh is the soil, its bones are the arrangements of the connections of which the rocks, of which the mountains are composed. Its cartilage is the tufa, its blood is the veins of the waters. The lake of the blood, which is throughout the heart, is the oceanic sea. Its breathing and the increase and decrease of the blood through the pulses in the earth is thus. It is the flow and ebb of the sea, and the heat of the soul of the world is the fire which is infused throughout the earth. The seat of the vegetative soul are the fires which breathe in various parts of the earth through baths and mines of sulfur, and in Vulcano and Mount Etna, in Sicily and many other places. And I say it's not a new theme, it's become something of a commonplace, but you get a sense of the physical reality that Leonardo senses in this. It's not simply a literary or philosophical formula, it's about real things, about how the earth works. We can look at two drawings here, and perhaps we don't need much analysis, do we, to say these look rather similar. They have a feeling of the blood vessels, superficial blood vessels of the arm, and the river near Florence, yeah, partly the Arno, that they have a similar feel to them. And Leonardo is doing this visually. And this actually is rather a profound drawing. On the left, you've got the superficial veins of the arms, but beside it, you've got the vessels of an old person, Del Vecchio, and Giovane, young ones. Young people's blood vessels are straight. They have easy, even flow through them. Old people's blood vessels, I'm sorry to say, looking at the back of my hand, are tortuous. They become very, very tortuous. As a river engineer, he knew if you had big bends, you got silting up. You got deposit and you got erosion. So the curved transmission of water is inefficient, ineffective. He does a dissection of a man who claimed to be 100 years old, dissection in Santa Maria Nuova, which is probably the leading avant-garde hospital in Europe at the time. And in the dissection, he looked at the old man's anatomy and decided he died because his vessels had got silted up. his blood vessels, particularly the coronary artery, as we would call it, around the heart. And he said this has got very badly silted up. And he notes that the old man's liver is like disintegrates in dust and so on. It's an amazing image of the elderly. So this is more than just theoretical thing of the vessels looking like the venae d'aqua, as he calls them, the vessels of water, the rivers of the human body. It's not just an analogy in that case. It's a very potent tool for diagnosis. Why did the old man die? Leonardo says the old man died in his presence, and he made an anatomy to find the cause of so sweet a death. It's a very, very beautiful incident. And he draws again and again upon the anatomy of the centenarian, asking different questions of the visual record he's obviously made. This is the hepatic system, the hepatic vessels, the vessels of the liver. Very beautiful sense of the branch, like the system of branching in the hepatic veins. And there is actually a big deal in this. Again, there's a philosophical thing that comes in. And he shows here the blood vessels in the heart. The heart done as just an outline. He's very brilliant in terms of demonstration methods. The heart of superficial things, he locates where they are with an outline. Here anyway is the heart with the hepatic vessels, the ones vessels to the left. The drawing to the left of that, the inner one is core, is the heart. And the other one is nocciolo, which is something like a pear stone, a plum stone or something of that sort. And he's looking here at the parallel between the heart as the origins of the vascular system and the liver as the origins of the vascular system, the tree of vessels in both cases. But this is actually part of a very avid traditional debate between followers of Galen and followers of Aristotle. The Aristotelian philosophers believed that the heart was the origins of the vascular system, compared with the Galenists who believed that the liver was the origins of the vascular system. Leonardo looks at the system and says that basically the hepatic system is the roots. The roots are in the dung of the liver, as he describes it, whereas the branches above come out of the seed, out of the nocciolo. He's fantastically potent in analogy. Scientists, in my experience, use a lot of analogy when they're thinking about it, but when the article goes off to Nature or the New Scientist, the analogy disappears. It turns into hard science, as it were. For Leonardo, a working analogy is a form of proof. It isn't just a convenient way of talking about something. So we're seeing here a really quite profound contribution to a great big argument about the liver and the heart, which has been a long-standing one. And he essentially has solved the problem adequately for his purpose. Further vessels as trees, this is called the albero delle vene, the tree of the vessels or veins. That's first on the sheet, almost certainly. He's a left-hander, so he starts in top right-hand corner. So I think the albero delle vene is there first. Then there's a whole series of staircases come in. He's looking through the staircase block to see. And the staircases keep the separation between the servants and the masters. In the bottom left, there's a column which is Bramante did some of these in Milan. A column which is a tree trunk with lopped off side branches. You can see those. So we think maybe these two things, they look totally separate, the staircases and the albero delle vene, but maybe there's a contact between them. And I think the big contact here is see-through. He's doing a see-through body and he's doing a see-through building. Leonardo does that kind of thing. You may be rather skeptical and say, well, it's stretching things a bit, but it's exactly how he works. That having seen the three-dimensional man, which he's wanting to do in some detail, and we will look at that, an example of that later, and the see-through staircases. And finally, he ends up with thinking about probably a rustic column for a garden shelter of some sort. And Bramante in Santa Maria della Pace in Milan did a series of columns exactly like this with chopped off side branches. Branching systems. He's fascinated by branching systems, how they work. And the bronchi in the lungs, in a highly tidied up version, these are dimostrazioni, they're not naturalistic images. They're demonstrations of structure. If I was asked to say what is, in my view, the most beautiful anatomical drawing in the history of it, with very distinguished examples, I would say this is absolutely ravishing and incredibly beautiful. But it's more than that. He notes the way in which the distal branches of the bronchi get narrower progressively as you go through. And he goes back to the tree and looks at a tree. In the top right, there's a tree with these semicircles drawn on it. And he says at each level, if you add up the rate of flow, it will be proportional to the cross-sectional area, the total sum. So, and further down, he's just looking at a tree with a silhouette of that sort. But you can literally count back. So the bronchi in the lungs bifurcate. They go 1, 2, etc. But it's always a constant flow, unless you get old, of course, in which case you're rather sorted out. But this is the ideal situation. Bernoulli in the next century looked at this and took it into being a law. But Leonardo does it by visual intuition. A lot of it is very visual, very intuitive. Again, I'd like with artificial intelligence to get some transfer from different areas. And I'll say a little bit about that at the end. But you wouldn't necessarily, if you're a surgeon wishing to understand about the bronchi, you wouldn't necessarily look at fruit trees. And if you're sometimes the demonstrations are very much dimostrazioni, they're not naturalistic. This, the brachial plexus, the network, very simplified. He knew at this stage, and this is relatively well into his work as an anatomist, he's aware of more complex things than that, but this is a dimostrazione, which is the principle of how the nerves of the shoulders and upper torso work, and the vertebrae and so on. So it's a particular kind of demonstration. You might think, well, this is not got much for the painter, but in the inscription beneath it, he says, this demonstration, questa dimostrazione, is as necessary for the good painter as is the declension of verbs for a good grammarian. So this is fundamental grammar of the human body, which the artist should know. The artist shouldn't just do superficial anatomy. What do things look like? They should understand what goes on inside the figure. Looking at the Mona Lisa, he's wanting you to understand the whole organism in the rocks. You remember the microcosm quote, which works beautifully with Mona Lisa. But he's saying essentially that if you're going to be a real artist, really show in a thrilling way the nature of the human body and the nature of the human being, then you need this complete understanding. It's an impossible agenda, of course, in a way, but immensely heroic. And much of the Mona Lisa's beguiling quality is he gets from the body of the woman to the body of the earth in a whole series of very subtle ways. In fact, this very famous drawing at Windsor, I think, is almost a preparatory study for Mona Lisa. Not in any orthodox way, but it's about the irrigation systems of the human body. It's a big double sheet folded over. It's folded over and pricked through for further development. But here we've got the system of breathing, we've got the blood, the vascular system, urinogenital system. It's a complete irrigation system of the human body, and very much related to the Mona Lisa, with nourished by the waters of the rivers and the bones of the mountains. The other, as we develop on with the microcosm, we've got the microcosm, the body of the earth. He calls that the body of the earth. It's a phrase which he actually uses. Yeah, this is similar to the one we looked at previously, and you get that sense of the microcosm. In the bottom left of the left-hand slide, you've got two weirs, which I shall come on to. Maybe not very apparent, but I hope you can just about see that the river has two weirs with little turbulent passages made in it. The earth for Leonardo is crisscrossed by veni d'acqua, by vessels of water. This is from the Codex Leicester owned by Bill Gates. The top one is just a very schematic dimostrazione, and he's not at this point dealing with the fires in the body of the earth. He's pulled out the vessels of water as a separate study. A very simple drawing, but gives you a good idea of how he's thinking. Here he's thinking about why is the earth unstable? Why do we get eruptions? Why do we get floods? Why isn't the earth just the elements arranged in static concentric rings? And on the left there, he's got a tetrahedron, a geometric body with water outside it, a round sphere of water. And he shows where the corners of the geometrical body stick out. This is a kind of model, a very schematic model of why we've got mountains sticking up and lakes going down. On the right, you've got some more organic, more naturalistic images of that. But at the bottom right, he's got a geometry going on where one bit of the crust has fallen, settled in the middle. And of course, this disturbs all the center of gravity. Anything, as soon as you have rocks forming, as in the left, or you've got these big chunks of masonry done as rectilinear blocks. Again, he knows it doesn't look like that, but the principle is there. And if you have one of the blocks drops down and goes to the next level, of course, the center of gravity changes, different bits of the earth come out. So this is an explanation as to why the earth is dynamic and unstable, often in dramatic ways. Why, he asks himself, do springs in mountains happen high up? What drives the water up there? I mean, it's a real problem, because water has a level and it would tend to settle down. He discusses many possibilities. One is distillation. And this double sheet shows his ideas about the distillation, that the veni d'acqua is like the tube of an apparatus with the water, the blood or whatever, condensing on the inside and then running down the side of the mountains. He decides this doesn't work. It's nice microcosmically, but he thinks that physically I can't make this system work, not least because for it to work like this, you wouldn't have any air in the distillation in the apparatus. For the exhibition in the V&A, we did one of his little experiments. The experiment on the left there is actually on that sheet we've just looked at. And what is happening there is he's got a vessel upside down in water, and he's heating it up with cold, so he gets it hot. But he then makes a little hole in the whole thing, and the water doesn't rise. On the right, this is the same experiment, but with the air being completely contained, and it goes up. And he decides that the distillation system in the mountains is not airtight. It leaks, and therefore it's not going to work. If you do it in an airtight way, it would work. But of course, that's not how the natural system is created. This is how his thought operates. Sometimes these are thought experiments. It's always slightly difficult, but some of them are definitely, he thinks of a theory, he has an experiment, and it's not necessarily a a real experiment. It's a thought experiment. And he can see sometimes it doesn't work, and he'll put a line through it and say, falso, false. This is an example. Is this an example of a real experiment or a thought experiment? What he's doing here is thinking about the increase in water pressure in a tank. And he's doing at the top right, he's showing the force that's needed for a plank to pull in to make a clear side and a clear seal. Little pulleys which have got weights on them. That, I think, is not an experiment, but the one on the right, he may be managing an experiment. What he's done there is one side of the rectangular vessel has got a leather face across it, and he could then pull the things in and read it that way. I think it's very open, but I think the top one, I would say, definitely thought experiment. The bottom one, maybe he's thinking of a real technique. That he need only just think it, and he knows that the grades of water pressure are very key. Knowing water pressure is important for the engineer. Hydraulic engineering was a big thing in the Renaissance in virtually all city-states. Here he's conducting thought experiments. On the top right, he's thinking about water pressure again. How do you measure it? He does a little sketch of the top right, and it's not effective. It's got a curly spout, which doesn't do at all well. So he simply crosses it through. Below it, he's got a quite different and sort of viable way of constructing the whole thing. And there the water comes out fairly low down the vessel. It then bends across and it hits a vertical flap, and the deflection of the flap measures the pressure of the water. It's a little apparatus for measuring water pressure. Sorry, I'm hesitant of the slides, but they're over there and they're not appearing here, so you can see them better than I can. He's also very interested in force and motion and bounce and how impetus works. He sees impetus as something which is like hot like heat is introduced into a body, and it has impetus, and it has to complete the movement that it is decreed to do. Sometimes he thinks of, again, little thought experiments. The two men standing on a rocking plank there, I call them penmen. These absolutely lovely little men who are doing these active things. And this shows the difference between a push and a blow, Leonardo. That if you simply push down, you don't catapult the other guy into the air. But if you jump from a height, same weight, but coming down with impetus, you would then have the man going up very quickly. It's a very vivid way of illustrating concepts of percussion, impetus, resistance, blow, and a bang, a knock. Looks at things in nature and abstracts them. On the right, the top right of this, these are from the Bill Gates Codex. There's a tree he's looked at there, and the tree is on the edge of the water, and the earth and so on is excavated out from that area. Below it, he puts in another trunk, probably as a thought experiment. And then he goes on and makes a whole series of variations, which are artificial ones, not, I think, observations. He wants to know what happens if the upright is at different angles. He wants to know what happens with different shaped obstacles, ones which water can flow over or around. This again is the manic aspect to it, that he's simply asking so many questions about this system beyond what is, I think, achievable, or certainly beyond that which any hydraulic engineer is going to need. But he has to have total understanding. He has to know exactly what is happening in all these cases. Amazing, almost miraculous images of water in motion, two planks cutting into a water stream at the top, then this very complex one, and on the right, one which is just water in water. And I think far from being an observation, the one on the left is a compound putting in the various factors, putting in the bubbles, putting in the vortices, putting in the flow, etc. So I think this is staged from a series of observations. Beautiful, beautiful observations. The poor man is almost certainly St. Joseph, who was rather befuddled to see that his young virgin wife was giving birth, and then generally sits in compositions looking completely amiss. Anyway, in this case, he's not getting a headache because of the water there. The sheet was folded over. But it's rather nice, isn't it, that unfolded it looks like this philosopher is contemplating what is a kind of nightmare of physics, trying to make sense of these motions. And I'm going to have to come round to read that again. Yeah, this is a translation of that text down there. You can see it becomes nota, N-O-T-A, note, or observe as it's translated. Observe the motion of the surface of water, which resembles the behavior of hair, of which one depends on the weight of the strands, the other on the line of its revolving. Thus water makes revolving eddies, one part of which depends upon the impetus of the principal current, and the other depends on the incident and reflected motions. It results in a very beautiful diagram, but it's again very extraordinary if you think about it, that these are different branches of physics. One is statics, the other is dynamics, carefully differentiated in modern science, but here combined with Leonardo into one thing. The sort of things he's thinking of feed into the Leda and the Swan. The tragically lost Leonardo disappeared as it's falling to bits, I think, in the 18th century. And here he's working variations upon the natural coils of hair. This is a kind of extreme engineering of spiral forms. And the head for Leda and the Swan with her progeny. This is the Wilton House version, which is, I think, the best of all the versions of a much copied picture. This was the most valuable Leonardo in his own lifetime, so it's regarded as a supreme picture. But if you look at that, you see that he's doing the wig, the one on the left, with some free bits of water coming out or hair coming out. The central whorls, hair is spouting out little leaks there. Round the head, there are little cascades of hair coming out. He's then on the right doing a variation of it, but on the left, he does it from the back as well. Raphael wouldn't have done that. Now, if you do make the front look okay, surely that does. If you're Leonardo, you have to be sure that the whole thing is structurally sound, that it obeys the physical principles. Therefore, he does the back of the head as well as the front. You can see why infuriated patrons. There's always that sense that he's wishing to discover something new and forgets to paint something old. This is back to that very extraordinary drawing at Windsor, this composite one. Now, what was virtually unnoticed when we did the Codex Leicester facsimile and notebooks and transcriptions and so on, is that on the left, there are two drawings of a tank. It's a rectangular tank. And he says, have this made by the potter, by the ceramic man, with a ceramic base and glass sides. And then what is happening there is, in both these cases, is he's got this long tank. He's got the upright vertical with a hole through it, which he can blow air or put water. And it's called a sperientia. That's actually the term he uses when he's discussing this. It's an experience, and he doesn't alter the word for an experiment and experience. Something which is observed as experimentia, something which is contrived into an experiment as experimentia. So there's that unified sense that if you look at nature hard enough, it will provide an experiment for you. And onto a bit of anatomy, which makes understanding of this. If you're looking as a medic, you're wishing to understand the heart, you probably wouldn't go to a hydraulic engineer. This is effectively what Leonardo does. These almost certainly are ox heart. There's a very good book by Francis Wells, surgeon at Papworth, former surgeon at Papworth, called Leonardo's Heart. He's established quite clearly these are based upon ox hearts, which are fine. They're not misleading in terms of human anatomy. It's a very remarkable series of drawings, late drawings. These are amongst the latest and last anatomical drawings he did, portraying the heart. And on the left, the tricuspid valves are made visible by the severing of the arteries. In the top right, he's showing the coronary artery. And this is all based ultimately upon the centenarian dissection, but developed on a good deal. And he draws the heart valves, the tricuspid valves, these aortic valves in isolation. An extraordinary, brilliant mode of demonstration, demonstrazione, shown closed from the solid version, closed first of all, then closed from the top, then open from the bottom, and then two further ones which are open from the bottom. It's an amazing demonstration, amazing way of visualizing how to explain how this valve works. It is known that the valve is passive. And this sort of geometry, he works at in his geometry. This is aliquot sixths, and the abstract geometry is essentially the same as the physical geometry. He says at one point in one of his anatomical drawings, "Let no one who is not a mathematician read my principles." So he sees this as absolutely the mathematics of the human body. He delights in this valve because it's got hydraulic engineering, it's got maths, it's got flesh and blood anatomy. It does the lot. It's a very special study for Leonardo. This is further ones from the Bildergates Codex, and he's trying to work out what happens in this compressed valve. He knows it goes into a narrowing aorta, and there's no musculature, there's nothing to operate the valve. The valve operates in relation to the water itself. In the top right, I hope you can see as I barely can, there's a shaped vessel with writing inside it. And here he's saying, make this in glass. So he's going to make the neck of the aorta in glass, and he's then going to put membranes inside it to see what happens. Pump up water, see what happens. This was done for me, as it were, by Murray Garib of Caltech. He phoned me up when I was at Princeton and said, "I'm building Leonardo's model of a heart valve. Do you want to come?" There are some invitations you don't refuse. And he was a specialist in aeronautical and biological engineering. A very Leonardo-esque job. Anyway, but when I got there, he'd done the glass, but he hadn't as yet put the flaps of the valve in. So you can see exactly what Leonardo is talking about. The aorta goes poof through, it hits the wall of this constricted aorta, and it goes back in spirals. That is exactly what Murray Garib had. Going back in spirals, it means that the cusps of the valves are filled up. the blood goes through when the valves are relaxed. The blood circulates and fills up the valve, so there's no reflux of blood. This is precisely what happens, but here it was, Maury built a model and was able to envisage the flow, which of course Leonardo couldn't. When Leonardo wanted to know what water flow looked like, he used panic grass seeds or dust or something of that sort, in a desperate attempt to make these invisible motions visible. A lot of it was done with theory rather than direct observation for fairly obvious reasons. This then feeds back into the hydraulic engineering. This is from that sheet we saw earlier with 2 weirs. This is the Arno west of Florence, which is not navigable. But here we've got a great vortex coming down like the revolving blood in the heart valve. And there are 2 ruptures in the weirs, and he records underneath the roads in each case, or the banks in each case, the length of the damage. The length of the second damage was twice as long as the first damage. It's labelled back to front, so I think this is Leonardo as a consultant for the Signoria, for the government in Florence. They're not going to really react very kindly to something labelled in mirror script. And this is how he thinks about things, that the heart valve and the aorta are much the same. And for the Victorian Albert Museum exhibition, we put together what I hope is a video which is going to work. Yeah, it's beginning to work. The heart in contracting is twists. It's like squeezing out a towel. These are done for the V&A exhibition. Look at little fellows on the right. I think Leonardo would have liked that, and it's very much the sort of thing I'm thinking of for artificial intelligence, with visual parallels, putting things together which don't normally belong together because they're classified as different things. They're not classified by what they look like, they're classified by artificial criteria of what belongs in what area. And at the end, just a kind of homily. Leonardo, as a water engineer, knew didn't like being pushed around. He was involved in a scheme to bypass Pisa to make a canal from Florence to the sea. The Arno refused to be pushed around, and he learned a lot from that. In the Codex Leicester, he encourages the engineer to use nature. If you understand how flow works, how turbulence works, how silting works, then you can operate with nature to underline that. And I've assembled just for the end a quick postscript. Yeah, these amazing deluge drawings from late in his career, where the power of nature has run over anything which the human beings can cope with. Something we see ourselves, of course, in massive geological events, which should make us more humble than we are about how we treat the Earth. The one on the right is a very beautiful drawing, which he's inked in. He obviously felt it was a special drawing. But this is the contained water experiments, isn't it? It's the movements of water in the vessels, but here on such a scale that it's destroying everything in its wake. One of the deluge drawings has got men and probably soldiers in a battle on the right, being dragged off their horses, trees pulled horizontally in the storm. Leonardo was involved in the Battle of Anghiari. This is a little version of what remains of the copy of the Rubens copy of the Leonardo battle. But these seem to me to have a very profound message, how even human disputes are puny compared with the powers of nature. In two of the drawings, we've got battle tents. Battle tents are little padiglioni, little pavilions. And if you look hard on the one on the left, the black chalk, you've got an upright with cloth flapping around it. And on the right, you can see that. There on the right, you can see it even more clearly. And where do the battle tents appear? Where do we get the battle tents from? Piero della Francesca in Arezzo, calm geometrical, but no one would think of putting Piero della Francesca next to Leonardo. The whole tenor of what they're doing is so different. But again, I think AI, I'm looking for it to produce surprises. And the surprises would be in keeping with different ways of thinking about things, of breaking out from the rather linear thinking that we all tend to do in our own professional area. Anyway, that's the end of that. Thank you. Thank you.
Martin, thank you so much. There's nothing else to say after that, except for we will be opening up to questions. So please, if you had any burning questions or comments that emerged from that wonderful lecture, hold them in your minds just for a minute or two. Meanwhile, I should say that I personally have been privileged to work with Martin on a number of occasions. So you can imagine what you've learnt in that hour alone. I've had the real honor to be on the front lines of some of these really interesting insights. One of which actually is, you can see it up there, it's an expansion of this lecture you've seen here. It's called the Da Vinci Masterclass. It's a 6-part lecture series, which actually has been done live here at the Royal Institution in the library, and is available also online. It's been produced, and Martin has really expanded on many of the points that you would have we were privy to today. So that's the Da Vinci Masterclass. We also very shortly are going to be doing a very short demonstration of the latest project we're working with Martin on, which is relating to artificial intelligence. I'll tell you more about that very shortly. But in the meantime, are there any questions that you wish to ask of Martin? Okay, so we'll take 3 at a time, if you don't mind, Martin. Is that okay? Yep.
If you remember them, yeah.
Okay, all right. So if we can just keep them quite concise, that would be very helpful for Martin. So we have one up here, check shirt, please. And, yep, one here is a blue blazer, navy blue. All right, navy blue blazer here. Anywhere in the middle here, anyone? Okay, here we have a wonderfully sported beard here on the bottom right. Okay, so we'll take those 3, please. So, please, go ahead.
You mentioned that Da Vinci was left-handed. Which hand did he use for the mirror writing, left or right?
Do you want me to stack up the 3, or shall I deal with that one?
Sorry, can you repeat that a bit louder?
Oh, no, I've got the question. I'm just saying, do we stack up 3 questions, or should I answer that?
I think let's do the 3 questions first. Sorry, yeah, good, that's a good point. We'll go down here, please. There's a mic coming your way, sorry.
Is it known why he wrote backwards?
Is it known why he wrote backwards?
Yeah, that's related, yeah.
And one here, please. There's a mic coming right there.
Sorry, I have a more complex question. What you're showing here is called today a deficiency. It's like people who cannot focus and concentrate. Why was he able to actually survive and thrive like this, and many people today are not?
in the order you prefer.
Yeah, the first two are about left-handedness. Leonardo writes with very slow-drying ink. He writes with smudgy chalk and incredibly small manuscripts. And I think rather than hooking over, he simply flipped the whole thing over. Some left-handed. How many left-handers in the audience? Can any of you do mirror script? Yeah, there we are. Excellent. It's been shown that people who are left-handed, who are forced to write right-handed, there was an article in Nature about this, can do mirror script. And I've been in some audiences where some people can go both ways at once, which is kind of indecently good. But I think it's a practical thing. A lot of the writing is tiny, tiny writing, very quick, in smudgeable media and these very tiny little books. I think he finds it inconvenient to do it in any other way. On the question of the kind of psychological problems that Leonardo can do, the first is we can't put Leonardo on the couch and analyze him. There's a lot of medical data, personal data, which we can't get. He clearly has some extraordinary mental capacity for linking unrelated things, but there's a definite problem in finishing, in reaching a conclusion. So if he starts painting, you can always see a different way of doing it. The paintings are full of alternative versions going on underneath. The National Gallery Leonardo, which we've now examined, there are at least two different schemes under that second version of the Virgin of the Rocks. He can always see so many alternatives. He can see different ways of doing it. But I'm not inclined to make medical diagnoses any more than I'm inclined to go along with Freud, because he's not available for the kind of testing one would like to do. But if he had some kind of mental proclivity which prevented him from doing things, it's both a tragedy and a delight. The tragedy, he didn't finish things, a delight in the excitement of what he did do.
All right, we'll take one more round of questions. Any other questions that have emerged? Okay, so we have one down here. Anyone in the middle? Okay, we have one here and one more in the middle. Oh, we'll have to go at the back. Okay, all right. So, blue shirt. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So, obviously, he's produced millions of kind of pages of information and, is thinking of many, many things at once. How much of his work have you managed to get through? Do you think you've seen all of it, read all of it, analysed all of it, or do you think there's still some out there?
Yeah, there are two modes of answering that, and one is just the sheer quantity of material. I'm doing this huge edition with Domenico Lorenza, who worked with me on the Codex Leicester one, of the French manuscripts. There are 12 manuscripts. Each one is 60,000 words odd, varies a bit one way or another. And that is big in terms of more or less illegible handwriting and an incredibly difficult language. There's no scientific language in Italian which can cope with all this. He does a lot of sort of Latinizing words, whereas Latin was what these things were written up in. The vernacular was not a vehicle for scientific knowledge until later in the 16th century. Sorry, I rather lost track of where we are with that. Now let's go back to it.
Yep, next question in the middle there, please. Sorry, blue shirt here.
Who's the question I was answering? Yeah, let's finish this before we go on to...
Okay.
Is there more you'd like to see or analyze? Sorry.
Sorry?
Is there more you'd like to analyze?
Have you still got a burning
No,
kind of
there's two
list
bits of the
things
answer
do?
to that. I remember what they are now. One is, like all great writers, whether Shakespeare or Dante or whatever, the same passage yields different things. So there's that sense of even what you think you know about, you find you don't really when you get down to it. And the second part of the question was?
Was there a follow-up question?
Yeah.
No, I think that was the follow-up question, whether you would want to analyze more, but I think you've answered that. Please go ahead.
Yes. Were any of the manuscript notebooks read and influential in his own time, or were they only read later?
They're mainly read later, but as Domenico Lorenzo did in our Codex Leicester one, the Codex Leicester was known in circles in Rome, and it was known to Giuseppe della Porta, who was a sculptor, an engineer, and a canal maker. And that certainly had an effect. An Italian called Venturi in the late 18th century stole and copied quite a number of pages. And there are signs that the Leonardo Codex Leicester, which is separated out from the other ones, it wasn't with the British Museum, with the Louvre and so on, with the Bibliothèque Nationale. So there are clear signs that some of the knowledge was percolated through. If you want to follow this up, look up Giuseppe Palanti, Domenico Lorenzo's sections in our edition of the Codex Leicester. You probably had to find a good library because it's incredibly expensive.
There was one here. There was one here. Is it down? Is it down there? Oh, yep. Please.
I know Da Vinci was like a big pioneer in like linking nature to mathematics. How often do you think Da Vinci used the golden ratio or go into depth in it in his manuscripts?
Yeah, not often is the answer. The golden ratio in its full glory is basically a product of the 19th century when you bring Fibonacci series and equiangular spirals together. And it becomes a very elaborate system. Leonardo was at least as interested as was Piero Francesco in root 2, in the square root. And the golden section is something he knew about, and he knew Luca Pacioli's book De Divina Proportione, but the number of times he uses in his notes the golden section is very small. I get masses of reproductions with elaborate golden sections mapped onto them, often with thick pen work on thin reproductions. But no, he's interested in non-commensurable ratios, in things like pi, why certain things in geometry you can't get numerical equivalents for. And he was interested in the golden section in that respect, but in terms of the actual operations of geometry, the root 2, the Pythagorean system was a bigger issue.
Thank you, Martin. And with great respect, a round of applause, please, for Martin. Please. Take a seat.
Yeah, sure.
There will be another round of applause very shortly. But before that, I had a question for you all. How many of you have wondered what it might be like to have Leonardo da Vinci's mind by your side, so that you might ask specific questions? It could be creative questions, it could be ideation, it could be personal, professional, whatever. But how many of you have wondered what Leonardo might say about your complex problem today? Anyone? Yep. So this has been on my mind for quite some time, working within this space. So I have, as I mentioned previously, been privileged to work alongside Martin, but also other Leonardo scholars and people within that network. And I've also simultaneously, through various other projects, been working within the world of technology. And many of you would know now that artificial intelligence is the technology or the set of technologies that's really capturing imaginations around the world. And so I felt that perhaps there's a way to harness artificial intelligence to bring us closer to Leonardo, to allow us to interact with Leonardo in ways that are not only fascinating and interesting, but actually useful in different contexts. So on that quest and relating to this, we have started to develop a chatbot, an innovation tool. As you can see here, Vinci.ai. Now, this is the beginning of what I really believe to be an incredibly important project. I want to do a very short demonstration to you of what we're doing and what we're planning to achieve here with this. And I would be welcoming your feedback, actually, as to which direction you think this ought to go. We're in a very unique position where we do have much of Leonardo's mind captured in his notebooks. And we also have the likes of Martin able to provide the analysis of that so that we're able to, effectively model Leonardo's intelligence in ways that we haven't been able to before. So with that in mind, I want to just give you some kind of idea of some use cases that I think would be really interesting here, alluded to earlier on. So, design is an obvious one. Various kinds of design, be it product design, learning design, so designing your own learning journey, designing your own career. Of course, Leonardo had a very multifaceted, complex career himself. Research design, of course, to those scholars and academics and researchers who would be very fascinated to understand or to learn more about what Leonardo might have to say about them, their work, and where it might lead. But it also could potentially have other use cases for business strategy, for policy ideation, as well as for curation. So these are all areas that Leonardo's mind could potentially be of tremendous value. And we're talking about his mind, not necessarily his knowledge, which of course was from the context of 500 years ago. But in terms of how his mind works, those mental models are what we've been trying to explore in the Da Vinci Masterclass with Martin. And those are what we are trying to harness to give us some kind of valuable tool. Now, just a quick demo before we move on to conclude. So as you'll see here, we focused for now on product design in terms of our development. And in terms of product design, there are various questions that you might ask Leonardo's intelligence. And we've tried to kind of come up with and simulate those. I'll give you some examples. So it could be, a modular laptop docking station, a patient monitoring device for hospitals, a sustainable packaging solution for electronics. Now, if I were to go to a sustainable packaging solution for electronics, I want to talk you through the kind of computation, the kind of evaluation that this AI goes through. So if I were to click there, generate design, you'll see here that it's consulting different knowledge verticals, what we might today call knowledge verticals. Anatomy, mechanics, optics, it takes it through an abstraction engine, and then it comes up with a result. Now, this has been trained on various Leonardo data sets, okay? And also the analysis, centuries of analysis of Leonardo's work. But also, it's been trained on modern internet data and various other modern relevant information. So it's designed for the 21st century. So it's not just a quaint conversation with the Leonardo that we have commonly understood, but a kind of reimagination of what Leonardo might today offer us. Now, we are in the very early stages. You can just take a look as an example of the kind of responses you might get from the work we've currently done. But we are, as I mentioned, in a very unique position now, with the likes of Martin working with us and with a stellar technology team that many of whom are here today to produce something really, really special. So again, any ideas, suggestions or comments that you might have relating to this, there will be a reception afterwards. Come and find us. We'll have that conversation. But for now, what I would like to do is, if I take this out, okay, is to bring this event, this talk, and the Polymath Festival 2025 to its conclusion. Now, this, I couldn't have thought or imagined of a more apt conclusion with this talk, which exemplified the archetype of the polymath. And what we want to do is just hopefully leave you all with a reflection on what the polymath might offer us today, in today's world. Is it a relic of the past, or is it something living and breathing and in need of reimagination and rejuvenation today? I argue that it is. So with that thought, I'd like to conclude the Polymath Festival with a very special poem written by a very special person who has been inspired by Leonardo da Vinci and has created her own alter ego, digital alter ego, an avatar named Vinci, which has really captured imaginations across the world. It was on the front cover of the Royal Society of Arts magazine recently, and this is how I came to know how actually Leonardo not only speaks to us today, but also speaks to the future that might be imagined. So let me please welcome to recite this final poem, Samantha Tauber.
Do you hear the whisper? Do you feel the sound? Do you vibrate with wonderment that is so profound? Do you sense the universal nudge to reach for more? To reawaken the echo of soul lineages that came before? The path of the polymath is noble, guided by love, not fear. An Arthurian pilgrimage of being, pioneering the new frontier. The polymath does not divide disciplines. They dissolve walls with grace. Music becomes math, language becomes lens, a resonant glyph to embrace. Eyes to the future, the polymath knows no shame. They tune to joy and enlightenment, kindling their inner flame. Visionary architects for humanity, taking us to new heights, weaving the fabric of our reality, sowing consciously love and light. The polymath is a tuning fork, with their ear resting to the ground. They feel the pulse of the earth grounding to Mother Nature's sacred sound. And like a conductor, they know how to create space for new beginnings, honoring the silence, the very truth of our human race. For where will humanity be when AI challenges our own sovereignty? A conscious steward is the polymath, guiding us to remember our intrinsic divinity. And so, dear one, do you subscribe to a limitless mind? Just remember, a mind without a heart is like a compass that is blind. And so, now is the time to reflect on our natural state of being, an inquiring mind with urgency, driving impact for humanity. So let the world feel your essence, learn from your polymathic ancestors, plant the seeds through your encoded quintessence. For a true polymath is in mind, body, spirit, a unified being with a deep, deep love for humanity. It is now time for us to rise like an eagle, for what we will clearly see is the infinite, loving horizon of humanity's bright destiny.
And with that, I invite any of you who are happy to stay.